You can only ever experience something for the first time once, and with EarthBound, I always imagined what my first time playing would be like. Of course, it would be on original hardware with the player's guide in hand with a real cartridge over a long weekend where I could just soak in the experience. I mean, this was EarthBound. This was the brainchild of Shigesato Itoi. It had to be treated with respect.
But as years passed and prices went up, the idea of playing EarthBound in my gilded vision slipped further and further away. At a certain point, I was depriving myself of an experience that I knew would mean a lot to me. This game has all the marquee features of an under 10 hours approved instant classic. It's got a vast, exciting world to explore. It has a turn-based battle system that only gets more and more fleshed out as you go. It has superb writing. And it has a Japanese twist on what America is.
I knew all of this going into it, which is why I wanted to put myself in the right situation so that I could appreciate it. But there was probably never going to be a perfect time to play it. When EarthBound finally came to Nintendo Switch, I stopped trying to chase the perfect setup and just started to play it in this newly accessible way.
Instead of immersing myself in the game over a weekend, I played it over a week and a half during lunch breaks, after, and occasionally during my computer science classes.
And while I knew it had a bunch of the core features I look for in a game, what I got out of it was more than I could have ever imagined. It left me with a sense of hope, that no matter how rough things can get, we can always come back from it.
Instead of just playing EarthBound, I spent the better part of 10 years avoiding spoilers for the game. Luckily, as a cult classic, avoiding information is pretty easy. And if I ever did see something about the story, it was out of context and made no sense, something EarthBound has been known for since back in the day. In fact, like a lot of people, my only touchpoint with the Mother series has been through playing Ness in Super Smash Bros. Ever since Smash 64, Ness has been this character I knew surprisingly little about. He could shoot fire and lightning, which was surprising considering how normal he looked compared to the cast of Pokemon, pilot foxes, racers from the future, and space soldiers. He also hailed from this terrifying city of Onett, where drivers would just run you over if you were standing in the street. I think a lot of N64 kids like myself can relate to this unknowing, because not only was EarthBound not an N64 game, the SNES version sold so poorly in America that even the kids who had a Super Nintendo probably didn't play it. It wouldn't be for another many years before I even saw footage of the game in action. While I was working my first job at GameStop, the topic of anti-piracy measures in games came up. Back in the day, devs used to add code that would check if the software was bootlegged. The concept has become a bit of a meme because emulators bypass many of these security checks. But EarthBound has an iconic bit of anti-piracy code where the game adds extra enemies to make the game unenjoyable. But if you manage to surpass the excess enemies and get to the final boss fight, the game crashes and deletes your save. Absolutely spiteful. So it wasn't really until then that I started researching EarthBound and learned of its legendary status among collectors. Back then, cards were still hovering around the $200 range, and complete-in-box sets were hovering around the $800 range, which seemed otherworldly back in the day while also feeling quaint compared to what they go for in today's market. So EarthBound stayed in my subconscious from then on out. I wanted to play it, but never found the time to give it the chance it deserved. In fact, I was so excited to play it without ever actually playing it that this hard drive article really ruffled my feathers. I'm in this article, and I don't like it. Now fast forward to 2022. The credits have rolled, the world is saved, Ness is home, and I have no idea what to do with myself. I sit staring at the black "The End" screen that teases a third game, knowing that, in America at least, this is officially where the story ends. I reflect back on my journey and how far Ness came along the way. I think back to that fateful night when Ness wakes up to a meteor strike on top of the hill he lives on. It's exciting because it's the start of a new adventure, but it also has a tinge of melancholy air to it. Being an adult now, I can see this as an event that will lead Ness down a road that will change him forever. Childhood innocence is a major theme throughout EarthBound, and because of that, the 4 main characters could only be children. Ness is only 13 years old, just arriving in his teenage years, but no longer a kid.
I was bar mitzvahed at age 13 and became a man in the eyes of Judaism, and now that I'm more than double that age, I can say, no, I was not a man at 13.
But I can still remember being that age. It's a new age of responsibility while still having a lot of room to grow into the person you'll be by the time you leave your teenage years behind you. Ness is also living with his mother and sister outside the nearest city, protected from the corruption and evil down the hill. His dad is away on business and is only depicted as a phone throughout the whole game. As sheltered as Ness seems to be, he still has to grip with the challenges of growing up with an absent father, or how his neighbors the Minches view him and the rest of his family. When you go to talk to Pokey's dad, Aloysius Minch, he doesn't hesitate for a second to tell Ness that his family is a blight on the neighborhood and wishes they would move away. The tension stems from a loan Ness's dad borrowed from the Minches, and instead of saying no, Aloysius Minch said yes and now holds this over Ness and his family. That's a pretty heavy topic for a game rated KA, the early ESRB version of E for Everyone. But that's really where the cracks in Ness's innocence start to appear. He's about to set off into the country of Eaglin for the first time on his own. Up until then, the only things Ness had to worry about being attacked by were crows and stray dogs. But after the meteor strikes down, something more sinister takes hold over everyone and everything in Eagleland. The meteor introduces the main antagonist of the game into the world. Gygas has come to Earth from the future. 10 years from now, the universe will fall into darkness as Gygas forces it into a dark age. But after finding the Apple of Enlightenment, which prophesizes his defeat by a child named Ness, Gygas comes to the past to defeat Ness before Ness can defeat him. Gygas is the embodiment of evil and hate and greed, and his influence on the world can be immediately felt as he infects all the animals and people in the country. He can amplify the evil within them and enhance it until it overtakes the good and buries it. So now Ness must set forth on his journey to gain the strength needed to stand up to Gygas and prevent the world from being thrust into darkness. Ness's arrival in Onett opens up the game to the Japanese view of American cities. Busy streets, drugstores, arcades, and pizza shops line the streets. But less welcoming is the presence of the Sharks, a street gang of men in full-body suits who terrorize everyone on the streets with hula hoops, skateboards, and pogo sticks they use as weapons. Their leader, Frank, is much scarier. He comes at Ness with knives. He is literally making a conscious decision to kill a kid. Only the corruption doesn't stop there. After you rid Onett of the Sharks, the mayor is hesitant to thank you for doing his job for him. Why? Because it might negatively affect his performance in his next re-election campaign. It's only after you agree to deny any connection to the mayor that he agrees to help you move on to the next phase of your adventure. The corruption from the top trickles down into lower segments of law enforcement as well. Before you can proceed onto Tucson, the police chief invites Ness into the police station to ambush him. Unless you fight 5 different officers and survive, Ness is not allowed to leave.
It's shocking to see Ness, an essentially unassuming child wrapped up in political red tape and police brutality before he even leaves the first town.
These adults are all caught up in their own interests and how their actions will affect them in the long run, whereas Ness, in his innocence, can only focus on doing the right thing and proceeds to doing what is required of him. This contrast creates an apathy in the atmosphere of EarthBound where it feels like the entire fate of the world relies on a bunch of kids who get no help from the people around them. It puts Ness and his childhood naivety to the test in really mature ways as he faces more and more difficult challenges and threatening obstacles. The town of Threed is infested with ghosts and zombies, the usual kinds of monsters kids have to grow out of being afraid of. By fighting off ghouls and ghosts, it almost plays as Ness overcoming his childish fears in a way that makes him stronger at the end of the day. But while sometimes Ness and his friends have to fight the kind of enemies you'd find in a classic monster movie, they also find themselves in front of more realistic monsters we find in the real world. Mr. Carpainter is a man who bought a gold statue that was dug up shortly after the meteor struck. Since he came into possession of this Mani Mani statue, he's been acting strangely. He starts to believe that painting the entire world in blue will bring happiness to everyone. In order to help spread the word of Blue, he sets up the Happy Happy Village, a commune of sorts that allows Carpenter to share land with people who believe in his message. The houses, buildings, and even the cows are all blue in Happy Happy Village. It starts off innocently enough. The village seems to be a tourist destination, only in order to stay at the hotel you have to agree to learn more about Blue and the message the group is trying to spread. As the message spreads and Happy Happy Village gets more and more members, Carpenter becomes afraid of his religion being taken away from him, leading him to giving the order to kidnap a girl named Paula he deems to be a threat with the intent of sacrificing her in the name of Blue. Mr. Carpenter, as you have probably figured out, is the leader of a cult, and in order to save Paula, Ness must take on the cult head on, all by himself. To me, the Blue cult was pretty eerie. The music that plays during your time in the village starts off flowery and light until it melts into this creepy rhythm that's almost just noise. The impact of Blue felt eerily familiar too. I mean, how many times do I have to talk about social networks and their welcoming shades of blue that slowly radicalize people into storming a Capitol building as part of a group the network recommended to them? It's scary to think about a 13-year-old kid going up against these groups of corruption and hate. These experiences changed Ness and has him pining for home throughout the game as homesickness sets in and prevents him from moving forward in meaningful ways.
This love of home and urge to go back brings us to the next major theme of EarthBound, our relationships and how they shape us.
EarthBound handles relationships in a really unique way compared to how games usually handle them. Instead of providing you with stat boosts or perks, the relationships you develop in the game provide context to the characters. The relationships make themselves known early. Ness is a character of few words, but you learn so much about him from the people he is surrounded by. Ness's mom has a huge job of raising 2 kids alone while her husband has gone on business. Her work ethic is ingrained in Ness, much to the chagrin of his father. When Ness sets off and checks in with his dad to save the game, his father makes sure to tell Ness that working hard is important, but there needs to be balance. He notes that Ness's work ethic is inspired by his mother, but Ness should always make time for a break. But even Ness's dad himself has influenced his son in a major way. Much like how his father left home to travel for work, Ness leaves home to go on his own adventure. He is the direct result of his mom and dad's personalities. In EarthBound, relationships make everything possible. Eventually you meet Jeff, a boarding school student who eventually teams up with Ness to save the world, whose main companion is his best friend Tony. Despite risking severe punishment for sneaking around campus after hours, Tony does everything he can to help Jeff gather supplies and eventually escape the walls of the school. Jeff has been at the school since he was a child, and it can be considered his home. Tony and the other boys can be considered Jeff's family. He is an incredibly smart kid. He spends most of his time fixing broken tools and weapons. In spite of that, he is insecure, and upon meeting Ness, he tells him he is clumsy and reckless. Jeff lacks a lot of the confidence in himself, which probably comes from living at a school with brick walls surrounding it that threatens severe punishment for walking around the school during sleep time. He doesn't have a parental figure reinforcing his strengths. Having a best friend like Tony isn't enough when every adult at the school is trying to iron out the imperfections of the students that go there. But Jeff is so much smarter than he gives himself credit for. His intelligence was inherited from his absent father, someone we meet along Jeff's solo journey. When we arrive at Dr. Andinut's lab, instead of welcoming his son, he says how lovely it is to see him after 10 years and that they should get together again. In another 10 years. Even from this brief meeting, we can see just how similar the two are. They both love to fix things, and they're both clumsy. So while there is no relationship binding them in the traditional sense, Dr. A's influence on Jeff manifests in his passions, strengths, interests, and even in a few of his weaknesses. So in 2 of the main characters, we see how their parents influence their strengths. But there is one character I've waited to talk about until now who was negatively affected by his upbringing and family. Pokey. Pokey Minch stands alone. From the moment the game opens, Pokey is a thorn in your side. He wakes Ness's whole family up on the night of the meteor landing. Everyone can probably think back to when they were kids and imagine the Pokey of their group. In his eyes, he is the main character of the story. He's always sticking his nose into everyone else's business. He craves the attention of everyone around him, even during a meteor strike. Even the police beg Ness to get Pokey away from the crash site. But when it comes time to actually grow up, Pokey folds like a piece of paper. After Ness goes home from seeing the meteor, Pokey returns in a frenzy. His little brother Picky has gone missing, and instead of finding him alone, he begs Ness to once again inspect the meteor and find his lost brother. When the duo find Picky and are on their way home, the random enemies assault the boys. Pokey is the only one who does not try to fight back. Instead, he looks nervous and apologizes to the enemies. Throughout the opening sequence, I laughed at Pokey. He was all talk and never backed it up with action. But once the boys return home to face the music, I started to understand why Pokey was the way he is. Despite Pokey leaving home to save his brother, Aloysius takes both of his sons upstairs and physically punishes them in an unmistakable sound effect. It's in this moment that we realize how poor Pokey's home life is, and why he craves attention and superiority in the way he does. It's because at home he's ignored unless he screws up, and the way his father openly speaks down on Ness's family instills this idea of being better than everyone else into Pokey. As you progress through EarthBound, Pokey follows along his own story arc right into the hands of Gygas.
In the game, we see how the villains are the people who have few genuine relationships.
Pokey gets fed ideas of money and power from Gygas, and in return, Pokey just has to become Gygas's right-hand man. The person who followed Carpainter's order to kidnap Paula, that was Pokey. He did that. And while Pokey calls Ness his best friend in order to manipulate him into finding Picky, as soon as he finds a new person that can give him what he wants, he casts his friendship with Ness aside.
Pokey bases his relationships on what people can give him, making him an easy target to fall under Gygas's spell.
The relationships in EarthBound are focal in every way. Just the act of being together with your whole party makes you feel stronger. As your party grows and some characters are kidnapped or leave for training, you feel the weight of that loss. You are always stronger together than you are apart. This focus on unity was incredibly meaningful to me. Working together with people Ness met mere days before as they all sacrificed their childhood innocence for the common good of humanity, thanklessly, stuck with me in a way I wasn't expecting. And as Ness comes face to face with death and violence and evil, people and things who want to cause him harm, and then triumphs over them to defeat the evil at their surface and return them to their normal selves, gave me this sense of hope and optimism. Maybe it's naivety, maybe I'm wearing rose-colored glasses, but EarthBound made me feel like no matter how bad things get, we can always face our animalistic side and defeat the anger and greed bubbling in all of us. When Ness defeats enemies, they turn tame or go back to normal. Under Gygas's influence, people are at their worst. By facing them, Ness can turn their hearts back into pure ones and weaken Gygas's grip on them. But more importantly, EarthBound presents the embodiment of evil as a gold idol named the Mani Mani statue. While in possession of this statue, people fall under its trance and become a true pawn of Gygas. Their skin turns blue, hauntingly representing the person who is no longer in control of their moral compass. Pokey goes wherever the Mani Mani statue goes, hinting that he is wherever Gygas is. However, car painter and billionaire mayor of Forside Geldegard Monotoly are defeated and they lose possession of the statue and return to their normal selves.
Ness is presented with his own version of this statue, showing that no matter how honorable his personality is, it's still of a human, and he has a mean streak in him like anyone else. In order to reach his true potential, he has to face down his own evil desires and defeat them.
By returning back to normal after losing possession of the statue, it shows that there isn't a point of no return. Anyone who wants to make amends can, as long as they have the desire to. Just about a year ago, I lost my uncle in the blink of an eye when he passed away unexpectedly. In the months leading up to that, we were closer than we had ever been. He was the kind of guy who believed in people. He was aware of politics and completely pissed off with them because underserved communities get lost in the shuffle as the people in charge struggle for power. He helped anyone who needed it, whenever they needed it. Mardi Gras was his favorite time of year, and riding in multiple parades a year was his way of preparing to survive the rest of the coming months until Mardi Gras came again. He would throw the coolest stuff that no one else threw. When some people threw beads, he was throwing stuffed animals, light-up swords, and all kinds of blinky toys. These were the kind of throws that would make anyone who caught them feel special, and by only throwing these things, he made as many people feel as special as he could every single year.
To say he left behind a void is an understatement. I feel like I've been living in this fog since last May, and this grief has led me to put on a lot of weight, and I wasn't even in great shape before, and my mental state and my memory aren't working the way they used to. I mean, this was a relationship that empowered me, and I woke up one Sunday and it was gone. But playing EarthBound felt like wrapping myself in a warm blanket. It gave me this feeling that since it focused on Ness and the relationships around him and the people that he surrounded himself with, it gave me this sense of relief that I hadn't felt in a really long time.
Ness and his team are strengthened by relationships they make along the way too. EarthBound emphasized how important the people we choose to be our family are, and how the relationships we choose to build make us better. Ness and his teams use strength forged by these relationships to face greater and greater evil, and they always come out on top, leaving the world better in their wake. To me, this idea of putting positivity out into the world in order to make it spread is a powerful sentiment. Doing the right thing when no one else is can be difficult. And I'm not talking about the toxic positivity where you ignore problems until they go away because, spoiler alert, they won't. I'm talking about doing what Ness does. Do the right thing when it's hard. At the very least, you did something good. Maybe you made someone's day better. But maybe that action will lead to more good actions after it. Your positivity and good actions can beget more positivity and good actions. And while I knew that before, that idea has been tested by years of working retail and in the service industry, EarthBound just reinforced these feelings. Things can get pretty bleak these days, but this game reminded me that as long as people still want better for the world, we will be alright. We just have to keep spreading the goodness when we can and doing the hard things when given the opportunity.
It took me a long time to realize that there was never going to be the perfect way to play EarthBound, and it took coming to Nintendo Switch Online for me to realize that whenever it came and whenever I played it was going to be the perfect time. And it happened when I needed it the most, even though I didn't realize it.
Rarely does a game with so much build-up stand up on the pedestal I've created for it, but EarthBound not only met these expectations, it shattered them. It has become an essential part of my gaming journey, and my only regret is that I didn't play it sooner. Maybe I'd been happier the last few years, or at the very least, maybe a little bit more optimistic. It's as beautiful of a game as it is a weird one, and while I didn't even manage to go in depth on gameplay or the many different places Ness goes, in a way it doesn't matter. Shigesato Itoi could have sent Ness to Mars and I would have been on board. Through all the weird and wacky places, the themes of EarthBound never take a back seat. Ness's innocence protects him from the regular horrors of the world. His relationships guide him through the hard times and in conquering evil. And he brings people back to Earth out of the clutches of Gygas.
So while I'll never be able to play EarthBound for the first time again, I don't think I'll ever forget the effect that it had on me the first time through.